Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show. We're actually on episode 92, closing in on 100. Wow, been doing this a while, right? Uh, so, pretty excited about that. Just remind everyone to share where they're joining from and be sure to make comments, ask questions as we go along. We enjoy your engagement. So, Anton, you say you want me to open this one up?
Yeah, start with your graphic that you got.
Okay. We're talking about balance. And one of the interesting concepts of balance is that at times I'm not sure that people have a good concept because I think we most often think walking the middle of the road. And unfortunately, life is not a straight line. And a while back, I developed a graphic to illustrate this. And what we see on this graphic is what we want, that straight line happen. And we want to just kind of walk middle of the road between the extremes in life. And then the second line on the bottom is more of what life presents to us. We're up and down and around and about as we go through. And then finding balance means being able to move between extreme character, and have a firm grip on either one and gravitate one way or another as life takes us along. Welcome, Shrenik and Mary. Glad to have you guys this morning. So we just want to talk about trying to achieve balance in our life and not just walk the middle of the road, because at the end of the day, trying to walk the middle of the road all the time effectively is more like mediocrity than balance. Um, so, uh, thoughts on that, Anton?
No, I love the graphic. We've talked about this a lot in the past where people feel like balance is about being at the perfect center of a teeter totter, and it's it's not an equal distance on each side, and that's what's going to make us balance because the environment is not even right. So I think about it like when you look at climbing a hill, when you're on that hill, that teeter totter is going to be a little bit different in relationship to the base, right?
Mm,
That base is going to be slightly offset. So external environment matters when it comes down to being balanced. It matters in how much of each we need. But there's no argument that we need both sides of the coin in some degree at different times in life. It's never good to over index on one side and, be so truthful all the time that you forget to love, be so disciplined all the time that you have no flexibility, or be, have so much freedom that you have no restraint. Like those things just not, it's not how we operate as human beings. But our society tends to make us seem like, well, this is the right way. This is what we got to do. And we got to get better at talking about both sides of the coin at the same time.
Let me drop the graphic off for now. Yeah, and so one of the keys is to develop character in our lives and be able to have a firm grasp on the different characters that balance each other. One of my favorites is love and truth. Sometimes we want to speak whatever comes to our mind, even if it's true. We just because it's true doesn't necessarily mean that we need to say it at a given moment, because speaking truth just for the sake of speaking truth, in fact, at times can be harmful to people, harmful to relationships, and better to know how to show love, which comes in, love takes on different forms, compassion, and so on. Welcome, Hawk. Glad to have you with us today. But learning those balancing characteristics is the real key, and being able to move from one towards the other or the other way is part of how we really find balance. And I know that I think the reason that truth and love is the challenge, or the one I like most, is in my younger days, I had a real uh, affinity towards truth, and I was fortunate to grow up under a lot of teaching, and that teaching was very insightful. Learned a lot of good principles and rules. The problem is that I was had a bad habit of beating people over the head with the truth, and have a lot of people in my past that truly struggled with what I had to say, and I probably destroyed a number of relationships that had great potential. Welcome, Shona. Glad to have you with us, and appreciate everyone being here. Your thoughts on, or your experiences on BaLaNcE, Anton?
You know, I was just talking. I was doing a health presentation to like a community, and one of the members brought up, and point is like, well, are we supposed to be ever be happy with our health? Like, I'm 52 years old. I don't really need to work out that much. I don't love it. Like, but I feel like I never get to celebrate that I'm alive, I'm well, I'm functional. I always feel like the world is pressuring me to be better and to keep improving no matter what. And it made me think, and what it made me realize is that we do need to have balance when it comes down to our health, and the balance is between chasing the best version of ourselves and also self acceptance. It's not
Mm,
either or, right? It's not, hey, I'm content with where I'm at. I don't need to worry about my health and just celebrate it and eat donuts all the time. Like, but at the same time, like, hey, I'm 52 years old. I'm able to do all these things. I still do a little bit of rowing. I'm speaking about this person in particular.
mhm,
I still do a little bit of rowing. I still do a little bit of things. Yeah, I may not be perfect, but I'm still doing pretty good. Right. And it's understanding that, coming back to the life circumstance situation, certain times in life you have all the time in the world to go for walks, to do all the rowing, to
mm,
do a little bit better, but sometimes life is crazy, and sometimes you have to get a little bit more self-acceptance and let go a little bit of health, right? And then, coming from a health coach for so many years, it's weird to hear, but that's the reality. Like, that's how we have to be. Otherwise, we over-index on one and we end up in a bad situation.
yeah, I think of mental health versus physical health. Sometimes those are not uh, absolutely congruent, and finding that balance. And in fact, ideally we should eat lots of healthy foods, and Anton could tell us a lot about that, and very effectively so. But there are times where we want that something that just really has a favorite flavor, or it has sometimes it's a favorite memory, that we talk about it being soul food. And so we just really have to understand how to walk in that balance. Welcome, Lydia and Dr. Sindhu. Glad to have you all. Let's see. Hawk has a comment here he has shared. Said we've talked about this before, and it is a difficult balance. Yes, it really is a challenge, but if we learn how to get better at it, then it's going to help us be healthy in our life and our relationships. Hawk makes another comment. Said, but this is one of the many things I admire about JC. He spoke his truth no matter the cost. And Hawk is referencing Jesus, and indeed he did demonstrate the balance, in that there were times that he spoke very very boldly and forward of truth, and there were other times that he had the compassion part of love, to a point of weeping over people, uh, and other demonstrations.
That's an interesting one. And using the analogy that you brought up earlier, beating people over the head with truth, JC, as Fox says, JC, he never beat people over the head with the truth. It all came from love. It came from that balance. And even though sometimes the truth was harsh and it was blunt and it was delivered, with a very kind of in a coarse way, it came from a very, very loving place.
Mm.
And when that's done well, that's when we can be as truthful as we really want to. But at the same time, like, he didn't necessarily go around and focus on all truth, right? He focused on the truth that was the most important truth. He didn't come in and just beat people over the head, like I said, and then walk into the room and say, "Oh, this place is dirty. This place is filthy." Like, he just focused on eternal life.
Yeah. He, again, it's interesting. Culturally, I think we have a tendency to, in our culture, in the name of empathy, sympathy, we want to live in the compassionate world. And that's a great place to have as part of our ability, no doubt. But we, I think, go to an extreme in that regard, and we spend too much time there and forget to recognize and accept and even promote truth or right. And I think it's a challenge as a culture. At one time, and as we talk about, Anton, the pendulum swing, at one time, the pendulum was very hard on rules, regulations, authority. No doubt about it. That was part of my generation's approach. And now we seem to have swung the other ways. And the key is we got to find the balance between the two.
Yeah, I wish we could just really study history and figure out what are these opposing beliefs that we keep doing back and forth in these short cycles. Because the rule following and all that stuff is going to be right back. It's just give it a few more decades, and we're going to go too far on the freedom of expression and
Mm.
individualism and all that kind of stuff. And to correct some of the issues that come from that, we will swing back in the other way. So it's almost like, I feel like this would be the historian's ultimate job, is to figure out what are these opposite views, that we keep going back and forth, and how do we find ways to be more in the middle. And I feel like that is a great history lesson to constantly talk about that and remind people that we're never going to get away from our roots. We're always, as human beings, have a certain tendency to do stuff, and we must return to not going from opposing ends. It's a great idea.
Um, Lydia makes a good comment. She talks about being authentic, and being authentic is important. And as we look at who we are designed to be, we all have differing strengths in the way of these opposing characteristics. And so that's why, if we tend to be more on, again, using love and truth, if our natural bent, if you will, our authentic person is more towards compassion, then there are times where we are the person to be in the forefront of a given situation. And then, so the balance may not be just within us, but with who we are associated with. And I think that there is a purpose in having people that have those tendencies toward one of the characteristics over the other. And that's when we get into looking at teams. And the value of teams is we can combine those together. The nice thing, though, is as we grow and we understand these opposing characteristics and the concept of balance, we can, even if we have a tendency towards truth or love, we can still learn how to balance the other way. Again, my tendency, my natural or tendency or authentic me is I'm going to probably tell you like it is pretty straight. But I have over the years learned the value in being able to gravitate towards love and just be in the extreme, be so compassionate for people because that's what they need. And ultimately, they may need some hard truth. What do we call it? Radical candor. And but if that's all we do is radical candor, we're going to lose the opportunity to be able to reach out to people and meet them where they need to be. And let's see, Hawk has a comment. Says killing with kindness is also a dangerous path. Yes, killing with kindness is a great principle. And again, as something Jesus kind of demonstrated for us, but he did not stay in that on that one path all the time. You have a thought there, Anton?
That killing with kindness just makes me think of majority of managerial approaches today. It's either they're killing it with kindness or they're hammering over the head with the
Yeah.
truth. And we're not, once again, in the middle. And life is fairly balanced naturally. Like as a natural state, our life is balanced. It's we that off balance it. And if we actually pay attention as managers, as leaders, for example, for feedback, you will find a balance of good and bad. You just have to really pay attention because every human being that works for you exhibits both good and bad, attributes or outcomes, whatever it may be. And we have to figure out when we provide good, when we provide bad, but balance it out that way. But just simply being fully present with those people. We don't have to create or do anything. So that way we avoid just killing with kindness or constantly just giving them negative feedback. But to me, when I'm thinking, because that made me think about managers, what's opposite of accountability? If we say we want to be balanced with accountability, what would you say is opposite of it on the other end of the spectrum?
Of accountability?
Yeah.
I think of flexibility.
Okay. To
Because
me, it's
accountability.
autonomy.
I'm sorry. Say again.
Sorry, I was just saying. To me, it's autonomy. And it's interesting because we both think correct when we say, flexibility, accountability, discipline, flexibility. But to me, I say autonomy. It's giving people freedom to do whatever they want, and that kind of stuff. And when I think about it, I think about the push pull approach. And I'm sure as a leader, you coach a lot of leaders, and you've talked about this before. We need to know when we push our team. We need to know when we pull our team. Those are in a very basic, fundamental ways opposites as a manager, as a leader. And there's time when we need to step in and help them out and say, here's what you need to accomplish. Here's your expectations. And there's times where we get out of the way and we give them the freedom to do that. And maybe by example, we're inspiring them to do better.
My apologies. My technology is doing something crazy. I've got one picture up, and all of a sudden another one pops up in its place, and I don't know what's up with that. But yeah, I like the analogy of push pull, and how that sometimes we have to push a team, sometimes we have to pull a team. I think just popped in my head that part of our problem with balance is that we resist life as it flows, and as a result miss the potential to be in balance. If our tendency is to be on the love compassion side of the equation, and life calls for us to be truthful on it, we resist, and as a result, that's what creates friction, stress for us. And I think that's a key component for us as we consider it, is to be able to move and adjust with life as it comes along. And in fact, Lydia makes a comment that I think kind of goes with that, and that is we need to speak with what is needed to be listened, and not what pleases our hearing. In other words, we need to, thank you for that, Lydia, we need to adjust and be able to flow as life comes at us. Welcome, Edo and Rick. Glad to have you all. So yeah, maybe that's the key there, Anton, is that rather than fighting what life brings along and trying to move everything to that straight path that we think it should be, going from where we are to where we want to be all the time, then learning to be, I don't know, go with the flow more.
Well, be present in the situation. I think with just listening to Lydia's comment in your conversation, it made me think that one of the greatest enemies of balance is our ego.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you mentioned, like I can beat people over the head with the truth. I'm a truth teller, right? And if we are not present and we start to define ourselves as this person, and we start to feed our ego by like being this ultimate truth teller and wearing it like a badge of honor, right?
Mm,
Then instead of looking for opportunities to respond in that moment, kind of to what Lydia was talking about, we are constantly looking for opportunity to exhibit our strength. And
mm,
and it's done for all the wrong reasons. It's not balanced naturally as it is because all we're doing is looking at the one side of the equation all the time. We're never seeing this whole other world of love. We're constantly seeing on the right side or left side, whatever it may be, where is that opportunity for me to insert myself to feed my ego to be the person that can deliver that truth. I'm so passionate about that. I love truth giving. So we have to be careful to not feed our ego, and it's much easier to stay balanced that way.
wow. I think you have just hit on a real big one as well, because that's we need to be confident. We need to be accepting of ourselves, but not to a point of ego driving us. And that's where the value of humility coming in, and making the choice not to assert ourselves. And and unfortunately, in current conditions, we are dealing with people that, and under the guise of being authentic, are making some poor choices in relationships. So let's see. Hawk shares a thought. Says, "Yeah, I like the principle of Tai Chi. Push hands, same as when you do a kata. You can't go too hard, then you lose control." And Hawk, you're sharing some terms there. Anton, are you familiar? I'm a little bit familiar with Tai Chi. I do not know kata. Are you?
No, I'm not.
All right.
But I get what he's saying though. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's funny. My mom does a lot of Tai Chi.
And welcome Atif, and welcome Alexandria. Let's see here. Atif has a comment. Says in third excuse me, in third world or poor countries, people are entirely off balance because they're struggling to meet their both ends. The major part of their life is spent on fulfilling their economic needs. Definitely, excuse me, definitely a challenge, because sometimes we have needs that pull us one way or another, and what we have to do, and this is where we have to make decisions. Excuse me. If, for example, we have economic need and we feel pulled extremely in that direction, so as a result, we'll take the first opportunity that comes along, because we're so focused on that, not realizing that opportunity may not be what we need or what is best for us, but we'll make the decision out of balance. Let's see, Rick makes a comment. He says, "As I age, I've learned to just accept things as they are. Some things we just can't change." And acceptance is sometimes a big key. Like we talked about, as life comes at us, we are challenged to move one way or another, and we resist. And that resistance causes us stress and problems unnecessarily. Now, I know Hawk uh, makes has an opposing view. Here we've got some balance working between us. Talks about we can always change, and excuse me. That's the beauty, is that we can have those balancing characteristics, and I think they're both valid. We just need to learn how to begin to uh, understand how to move or gravitate from one to the other. I agree with both of you, that we can make choices to change, no doubt about it. But sometimes we need to just accept where we're at. And I'm going to get off a little bit on my own personal tangent, but that's where wisdom comes in. Wisdom helps us to know when to resist or when to accept. And those are challenges we face. um,
It made me think about something. This conversation. It's hard to look at balance as just two opposing things because we are an ecosystem, right? Our world is an ecosystem. Everything is connected. So when I look and I say, I want to change, but this thing that I'm trying to change, value and importance compared to other things that I may want to change. And if it's not, or I can't, it's not a strength, or it's nothing I can really do. Yes, I can improve. I think Hawk's point, I agree with. You can always change, but to what degree and how much, in comparison of investment of that time into something else, right? So, for example, you know, me trying to increase my vertical jump, how high I can jump and leap in the air, right? Yeah, I can get slightly better if I do some things, but am I going to go dunk a basketball? Probably not. Like it's not going to happen, but I still can improve it. Instead, if I invested that time into my mental development and learning a second language or third, whatever language, fourth language in my case, what why would I go and waste that time on that very small marginal change if I could take that time and invest into something that I can change much better? So when we're looking at it, I think there's a question that says, how can we know that our life is in balance? I think it's learning to assess our life from a big picture standpoint. And it's like, okay, it's not about having everything equal. It's about everything coexisting and everything kind of like functioning all together. It feels like all areas of my ecosystem of my life are working and functioning. And that may require some things to be much more on one side than the other, but it's happening because it's supporting some other structure, some other thing that's happening in my life.
Yeah, you're getting into something that's a favorite of ours, and it's the concept of congruence, and definitely a some in many ways it's a better way to look at things is seeing the congruence between the competing aspects of characteristics in life, and such an important one. Welcome, William. Glad to have you with us. Mary's comment. She says that ego is something that we need to discuss because indeed it is a huge problem. I know every time I let my ego get in the way, I usually cause a problem for myself and or others. And so, yes, it's a challenge. Let's see. Go
You know,
ahead.
one thing on the ego thing, like just tips for people, like if you're trying to be more balanced and you're trying to come from the right place, become more present. Before you start thinking, before you start making decisions, before you start assessing things, become fully present in the moment. Ego and being present don't like to mix. Ego is usually either focused on the past accomplishments or
Mm.
future or chasing future achievements. It's usually not focused on the situation. So try to become fully immersed in the situation that you're in when you're making decisions, when can you find in that balance? And I'm telling you, it'll help to calm that ego and many, many other things, like fear and different things that can get in the way of being balanced.
Um, Definitely. William has a comment. The problem I see is that things are going to be one sided because we don't have enough integrity in individuals. Everyone is following the my needs, my success story. There is only whoever advances my agenda. There's little shame, little humility, and with this, too many people are left to suffer. Um, well, and I agree, William, that at a core, and as Anton alluded to, ego is another way of saying self-centeredness or my way only. It's all about me. And one of the concepts that I have really been pushing forward because I really believe this concept is at the center of why we see what William's talking about. And that is the concept of our value as a person. We continue to decide where we want to receive our value. And so if our value is in promoting ourselves, and that's how we think that we're going to be most valuable, then we're going to go after that with everything we've got. And that's a problem. So, what I keep reminding people is uh, our value has been established, it is done. It is, we are all equally valuable in the eyes of our Creator. And we don't need to be trying to prove our value because every time we try to prove our value, it usually is at the price of someone else. And that's not the way we're intended to function. We should be accepting of our value, knowing that, again, I've got a quote about it, and we don't earn our value, so we can't lose it. Others don't give us our value, so they can't take it away. And God's given our value, and He won't take it away. And when we finally get a hold of that and just live in that, then we can focus on our strengths and our weaknesses and being complementary to each other rather than competing with each other. Yeah, that is a huge challenge. Um, and see, Rick was weighing back in. He says, I agree. We can change, but situations may not be able to, we may not be able to control situations. And that is so very true. And again, finding the balance. And I like the fact that as we can exchange and challenge one another in a good fashion, respectful manner, we can agree. And so Hawk and Rick are helping us to learn some new balances with different areas. And let's see here. Hawk offers what you're talking about seems to be encompassed by the term homostasis. Yeah, or homostasis. I'm sorry. And indeed, that is the case. Alexandria shares that balance starts at the center. Um, and so the the thing we just need to understand is in congruence in life or balance is we need to grow in as many good character qualities, good characteristics as we can, so that when it's needed to go one direction or another, we're able to do so. And then when we have the wisdom to know, then we understand how to shift with life as it comes at us. The things we can control, the things we can influence, we do. The things we can't, we let go and accept and flow with it, and not resist in the things that we cannot control or we cannot change. So yeah, I think we've opened up a little bit of a Pandora's box here, Anton.
Well, when we talk about change, I think Rick's spot on. You can't change circumstances sometimes because they're not under your control. You can choose to change your environment a lot of times, when possible. You can influence certain things, right? So whenever we talk about this from our standpoint, we talk about assess what you can control, assess what you can influence, and influence something is just I can execute certain functions. Once I've done those functions, I have to let it go. I have to let things play out as they may because there's external factors outside myself. But what I don't want people doing is I don't want people not taking the proper influential actions and just
Mm.
saying, well, I can't change other people. I can't change circumstances. I'm like, but once again, have you done what you needed to influence it in the right direction?
And one of my favorite quotes is, I believe it's Chuck Swindoll. He says, "Life is 10% what happens to us, and 90% how we react to it." It's the key is if uh, sometimes the change that needs to happen is us. Again, either not resist or to stand up and say, "No, I don't accept that," and and that is again a challenge that we all face. And the more that we can be effective in that, the more likely we're going to live with well managed stress. Because what I keep hearing is if we respond wrong, we create stress for us. And one of the things we're about with Perspective Force is learning how to effectively manage the stress we deal with. Sometimes, though, we create it, cause it for ourselves unnecessarily. Okay, so William's got a comment, says, how can we have balance if ego or pride is left unchallenged? Life has to be more important than just me. When we help others up the mountain of success, a lot of people find like minded success. What I'm getting at is ego doesn't help the world, only the individual. And indeed, uh, you're right. I think that sometimes and this is another challenge we face in our world is learning to speak the same language. We think we speak English. We don't. We speak American, and American is very sloppy. And sometimes we confuse ego with confidence. And we need to have confidence, and certainly as part of our life, but not to a point that it becomes self-centered. And so, yeah, we get into some challenges, but ego or selfishness definitely is a negative in most of life. We are, if we learn character well, we learn that it's not all about us. We're not the sun in our universe.
But the other end of that, and once again, balance, I'll throw out the other point,
Sure.
but for self-care, right? So personal development, you name it. There's a bunch of personal things that we need to do to focus on ourselves. We can't, once again, just over-index on others. We have to remember to take care of ourselves, to grow ourselves, to support ourselves, because if we don't, the world's not going to. And that's that balance that I see people struggling with right now. It's that, how much do I give to others? How much do I give to my family? How much do I give to my kids, to my friends, to whatever, to my job, versus how much am I taking for myself? And I feel like people are feeling like taking for themselves is becoming worse and worse. I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing everybody's talking about being a giver, but I'm like, but if you got, whatever, can't pour from an empty cup. If you have nothing to give, or what you're giving is subpar to what you could be giving, had you invested into yourself and nurtured yourself and recovered, you're doing the world a disservice by constantly focusing on the world and not enough on yourself.
Well, it's interesting, and Anton and I have experienced this with military, and are constantly made aware and reminded that if I'm not taking care of myself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, if I go out with the intent to help other people, and that's part of what I do in my service, I become a part of the problem and therefore create more problems. So there again, that balance. I think what we're helping people understand is balance or congruence in life's a bit messy, and there is no one size fits all to this. We have to be willing to be about balance. And Hawk makes the comment: if we can inspire people to change, what is the point of being a coach or a therapist? I don't think that we're, at least I'm not, and I'm pretty sure Anton in agreement. We're not saying that we can't help people change, because there are times where people come into our lives, and the primary purpose they're there is for us to help them change or grow. Or sometimes they come into our life to help us change or grow. It's all part of the process, no doubt. Welcome, Satish. Glad to have you with us. Late is okay. We're just glad to see you. Um, and then Rick makes the comment: in the beginning and at the end, all egos are equal. And see, that's where I get back to our value. If ego is about proving our value, we're fighting the wrong fight, because we are all equally, utterly valued as we are. We're created that way. And when we can get beyond that, we stop fighting over who's the best, who's not. Those things, we can begin to accept others. And again, I'm not bashful about using the Bible. The great commandment is love God and love others, but there's one other part to that, and as you love yourself. And that acceptance, that love of who we're created, helps us to then be able to love other people. When that commandment was given, it wasn't accidental that it was love your neighbor as yourself, because the two are intrinsically connected. And we have to make sure that we love and accept and take care of who we've been created to be. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And again, I like the concept of coming back around to congruence, because rarely is life a choice just between, at any given moment, just between two characteristics. Chances are life's going to come at us, and we're having to consider balancing dozens of characteristics at a given moment, and that's a that's when we start maturing, I guess. Is
You talking about ego and just makes me think. I asked you that question about what's opposite of accountability. What's opposite of ego?
being completely selfless to the point of giving our life for someone else.
It's interesting because, and perhaps that's true, but it's almost like saying ego is a negative. I don't believe that ego is a negative. I think that everybody has ego. I don't care how selfless you are, even as a 100% selfless person, you still define yourself as a selfless person, and you feed yourself and your drive to be more selfless through that act. And in a way, I think that's still feeding our ego. And the point that I'm making is ego is not all good and not all bad. It can be used in very positive directions. I think that we just have to acknowledge its existence. In order to keep your ego balanced, I think opposite of ego, we don't know. There's bad ego on one side and there's good ego on one side. I really look at it that way because I think no matter what, ego is within all of us. It's just how do we feed it? Is it through bad actions that are self-centered, that are coming from a place of scarcity, or is it from good actions that are coming from a place of abundance and focused on others? But I think one way or another, we're still giving it to our ego.
Yeah, and one of the challenges that we face, and that is kind of become a side mission, if you will, for me, is understanding language, understanding words, because I haven't looked up the definition of ego. I think, and I will be doing that just because I need to understand what is the considered the common thought of what ego is. um, and but at the end of the day, understanding terminology and agreeing on it becomes a factor. Some people, you say ego, they automatically go bad, bad, bad. And then others say, ego is essential, and so on. So finding common terminology, and more importantly, not overreacting because the way people use terminology without the context. Because I know Anton well enough when he's talking about ego and that it's important, not good or bad. I know Anton is one of the most giving people there is around. So it's not an antithesis to selflessness. In fact, as I speak, I realize that I offered selflessness as an opposing force, and I agree. I don't think it is. I think there is more to balancing in that and understanding it. So it's a challenge, but at the end of the day, I respect Anton enough that I didn't go, well, hey, that's stupid, or I don't agree with you. We have such a level of respect and love for one another that we don't get so wound up. Plus, uh, I don't have to be. I don't gain my value by being right. I may need to just sit back and listen, and I don't have to fight to be right. It's not important. What's important is a relationship that I have with people. That is uh, the way we should approach things.
I'm
And
just looking at the definition of ego. It says
uh-oh.
a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. So I know we talk a lot about God and things like that. Like, I think we should have self-esteem. We should feel that we're children of God and we're amazing. He created us in His image. So that's pretty remarkable, right? So, like, if you don't have a self-esteem over that, you're missing the point of this amazing creation. The other one says the meaning of ego is the self, especially as contrasted with another self or the world, right? So it's not necessarily good or bad. We've just made it be bad in a society that tries to teach selflessness all the time. And they put that, I kind of knew you were going to say that, so I teed you up that way. But it's just, we put these opposing concepts, but it's not a bad thing. I think the problem is that then you say ego's bad, So then people start to deny the existence of their ego because they feel like, well, I'm not going to have this bad quality in me. I don't want to acknowledge that. And then they don't deal with it properly. And trust me, ego is going to drive us one way or another. It's whether we understand it and we control it and we, influence it more or less, or we don't and it influences us.
Yeah, it's I shake my head. I watch people, and I've even been guilty of this. I've had people that I get into discussions with, and because of a connotation of a word used, we will debate one another. In the end, we're not debating concepts, we're debating how the word should be used and its connotation. And in fact, in my journey, at one time I had a coworker that he and we couldn't be in a room more than about 5 minutes before we we're debating something. And our boss one time laughed at us and said, "Do you understand that you guys agree you're just arguing over who's going to be right?" And so, um, and so we have a challenge in letting go of being right and rather focus on learning and how to complement each other as part of the world, or in spiritual terms as part of a body. All right, let's see. William Hearn says, I am a Christian. I try to base my response on Jesus. He didn't have an ego, and he was here not for himself, but for others. We may not be him, but I find it more rewarding to help others than to focus solely on me. That doesn't mean deny me and not be concerned with my needs, especially when I see suffering around me. And then Hawk makes a comment, and I think this kind of helps sum up a lot of what we should be saying as Christians, is that what would Jesus do? And I think that's where we agree that we model after what Jesus did. And in a bigger picture, Jesus modeled congruence, and that at any given point he could be forceful, and, if you will, it could be by outward appearance self-centered or ego. I suspect that when, part of the story of what Jesus did, there was a situation where people were in and around the temple, and they were buying and selling sacrifices and making money off of people's spiritual journey. And Jesus' reaction was he fashioned a whip, and he went around and he was using his whip and turning tables over. I have a feeling that those people around when Jesus did that thought, man, he's got an ego the size of Texas, and certainly could be appearing that way. So, perception, how we deal with it, is important. Key piece is to be able to respond just like as Jesus did. And at times he was turning tables over and chasing people around. Other times he was weeping over the loss of his friend, or he was offering forgiveness to people that had made wrong decisions, and so on. And just balance. So we're back to what we were talking about, is the concept is of balance, but it's not being mediocre. It's not walking in the middle all the time. At times, our behaviors have to be what some might perceive um, as negative. It may be considered ego. And I like what Lydia says. I think this kind of really gets to it, and that is having a servant's heart. One of the things that we're using an example of Jesus, and I think it's a great example. And one of the things that we know about him is he chose not to demand his position that he naturally could have by choosing to be a servant. And that becomes the center of what we consider is, how do we choose to be a servant at the and what that looks like at a given moment, and get away from fighting over words. For me, again, I am confident in my value, so I don't have to try to prove myself. I used to. I was very guilty of debating with people over things, and I wasn't debating the concept as much as I was debating whether I was going to be right or not. And that's a dangerous, bad place to go. Anton, your experience or thoughts with any of that?
Well, I'm the same way. It comes back to stress. I mean, that's what we talk about a lot, and then it always comes back to it because when I'm stressed, my internal view of myself is diminished.
Mm,
And when that view is diminished, I'm going to do external things to try to bring it up. And
mm,
winning arguments is the easiest way to try to falsely increase that view of self. But the problem is not the argument. The problem is not the view of self. The problem is the stress that has caused my view of self to diminish. And, I talk about chemicals and neurotransmitters and all that kind of stuff all the time. And then that's what stress does to us. It destroys that. And then that little, I go to therapy and my therapist calls it the little boy inside me. That little boy starts to act out, starts to misbehave. And then the grown man on the outside starts to act out and misbehave based on those kind of actions. So we have to acknowledge that sense of self. And that's why I'm saying always keep coming back to ego is not necessarily a bad thing, especially when we look at ego as just a sense of self. If that definition of ego. And we talked about Christ, and I don't know if Christ was free of ego. Christ had a very strong sense of self. You have to have some of that in you in order to go and flip a table in a crowd, right? In order to step out so far outside of what's expected in that moment, in order to, he was doing on behalf of his father, on behalf of our salvation, but it's still, you still have to be able to take that very strong action. And I think if you don't have a very strong sense of self, that's not going to happen.
yeah, that's the challenge. Is that if we say we don't have value and therefore we abase ourselves in terms of our value, we're denying what God says on so many levels. But on the other hand, if we go around and all we ever choose to do is assert ourselves and uh, promote our value, we have missed entirely what Jesus exemplifies. And so we're back to balance and congruence, is just understanding both exist. Where do we live in that continuum? And I think we part of the key is to not resist that. At moments we're going to need to assert ourselves, and at other moments we're going to need to deny ourselves to a point of abasement. And we neither of those extremes is right all the time. And I think part of it, I know me, part of what I like is to have this neat formula, and I just plug in the variables and go on my way. And by, in my opinion, for purpose, we aren't designed that way, and we aren't given the option to plug into formulas, because what we're about in our human experience, and frankly, what we're about in our spiritual experience, is about relationship. Because the whole reason of Jesus' actions was to restore our relationship with our Creator, and the value of relationship is so key that we are given ways to develop and grow in those relationships to become one body, how function as a healthy one body, each of us a part of it. Welcome, Kwame, Mind Innovator. Glad to have you with us. Uh, so, wow, we have really dug in some deep things here, Anton, and good things.
We can wrap it up as we're almost to the top of the hour. But as always, before I finish, I just thank our audience. You
Oh,
folks make
yes.
this amazing. You help so much with your comments. You help show so much for showing up. Every week it seems like we get to a more and more constant base of audience. I feel like double digits now is good, where before we're like, oh, we got 5, now we got 10, then we got 15, then we got 20 viewers, and but consistently showing up, right? And just thank you. That's all I can say.
Yeah, we respect you guys, love you guys, because what you do is help bring balance to the conversation. And we can, with that respect and the love as a basis, we can learn from each other and grow from each other as intended in such amazing ways. And so, yeah, we appreciate you and hope that you can join us regularly. And by all means, when you're there, please feel free to comment, put in, share inputs. Very important. Very makes the our time much more effective. Anton and I don't need to be talking all the time. I can assure you of that. And so, thank you. Please, part of what we're about is the Human SOS movement, because the Human SOS movement is all part of what we're talking about. And some of the goal here, one of our missions is that we want to help people manage stress well, because especially in our current current culture, we are not managing stress well. And as a result, we are losing our effectiveness, and we are hurting ourselves to a point of people dying from the stress that is out there. So we offer a stress assessment. It's free. It's really not complicated, but don't want to sound selfish or have much ego, but it's a very effective tool to help us really evaluate and get to the root of things that cause us stress. And really, it's just a good life evaluation tool. Wouldn't you say, Anton?
Absolutely. And it gives you a way to kind of prioritize where to start corrective actions. That's one of my favorite things. We talk a lot about 10% improvement. Go find the thing that you scored the worst in, and then just focus on correcting that thing, and see how everything else gets better. And hopefully it will, and it should.
Yeah, this is our passion, folks, is we want to help others begin to effectively deal with stress in life, because it's there. And people that say, well, I want to be stress free, they're kidding themselves. I don't mean to be blunt, but they are. And in fact, to be stress free is not healthy either. So, again, thanks. We appreciate all the exchange, the comments, and anything good about the program is more about you guys than it is about us. So, thank you. And we'll be back next week. We'll get the word out on the topic, but one thing we know, we'll be back. Well, Anton, did you say you might not be here next week?
Yeah, I have to figure it out still, but yeah, it might not be. Next 2 weeks are kind of up in the air. I'm starting a new job, and there'd be some onboarding stuff.
Oh my, you're going to expose them to me by myself. I don't know, Anton. That
You,
may be cruel and unusual punishment. But either way, one or both of us will be back next Tuesday. So plan to join in, bring others with you, so that we can have some good conversation and just grow and learn together and look at ways we can manage our stress more effectively. God bless everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and hope to see you back next Tuesday. Bye now.